What is happening, fam? John from AF Anime here, and today I'm going to do something a little bit different and talk about the Dragon Ball movies. Or more specifically, I'm going to review each and every Dragon Ball movie and then rank them in order from my least favorite to my most favorite. And seeing as how the Dragon Ball movie roster is actually incredibly long with a whopping 27 movies so far, I am going to be breaking these movies up into groups and then ranking them. And then at the end of the playlist, I will go ahead and give an overall ranking for all of the Dragon Ball movies in their entirety. So that means I'll be rewatching all movies from Dragon Ball Curse of the Blood Rubies all the way up until Dragon Ball Super Broly. Now, I should preface this by saying that in general, I'm not a fan of non-canon material, and as such, I don't typically indulge in anime offshoot movies. However, when it comes to the Dragon Ball franchise, I've actually been a tad bit impartial. I've seen every movie that Dragon Ball has released, minus the first 3 movies, which take place before the Z era. So naturally, the first video of this playlist is going to be covering those 3 movies which I actually have not seen yet. And those 3 movies are going to be Dragon Ball Curse of the Blood Rubies, Dragon Ball Sleeping Beauty in Devil Castle, and Dragon Ball Mystical Adventure. Now, before I begin the review, if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. It would greatly help me out, and it will help you keep up to date on this playlist and more Dragon Ball related content. Alright, now without any further ado, let me get started with the first movie, which is called Dragon Ball Curse of the Blood Rubies. Now, I just got done watching this movie, and I gotta say that it has a totally different feel from the Z, GT, and Super movies that I've seen so far. So I'm going to go ahead and offer up a spoiler warning for the entirety of this video, as I'm going to briefly recap the plot of each of these movies. Naturally, starting with the first one, the title is called Dragon Ball Curse of the Blood Rubies, and this refers to the big bad of the movie, King Rubies, discovering an underground resource called blood rubies, which happens to be spread throughout his kingdom. And upon discovering these rubies, he decides to tear up the farmland of all of his kingdom's inhabitants and search for more blood rubies. And while he shows no concern for the well-being of his citizens, his greed becomes so insatiable that it actually begins to discomfort him. And with this discomfort or hunger pain, he rationalizes that if he finds the Dragon Balls, he can use them to make the dragon grant him a wish that would satiate his hunger. Now, as the title of the movie implies, this hunger actually comes from the curse placed upon the blood rubies. And naturally, it is his search for the Dragon Balls that causes him to cross paths with our series protagonists Goku, Bulma, Yamcha, Puar, and Oolong. So this does ultimately sound like a good setup for a grand new adventure for the characters of Dragon Ball, but ultimately this kind of just serves as a retelling of the Emperor Pilaf saga, which, if you didn't know, is the very first saga of the Dragon Ball franchise. The only difference here being that the King Rubies is swapped out for Emperor Pilaf. So I suppose instead of it just being the funny, goofy story that Dragon Ball fans have come to know and love, the movie itself actually serves as an introduction to the series, as well as a meta-narrative on a monarch's influence upon their people should they give in to the greed of industrialization. Now, as a Dragon Ball fan, I gotta say, even looking back on a movie like this one that actually took place well before I was even born, I can see how it would appeal to certain type of fans. So to the casual moviegoer who wasn't a fan of Dragon Ball prior to seeing the movie, it might have just seemed like a quick one-off adventure and may have even served as a good introduction to watching the anime on its own. However, with the exception of the action scenes in this movie, I would have to assume that for most Dragon Ball fans who went to go see the movie after already being introduced to the manga or the anime, it would have had to have kind of felt like a middle finger in the sense that it's just recapping things that we've already seen. I mean, to be totally honest, it kind of felt like the last 10 minutes of the movie really comprised the majority of the conflict between the heroes and the villains. On top of that, the ending itself kind of felt rushed and kind of like a cop-out. I mean, I could totally understand that the king regaining his original form seems like a proper, happy ending, but at the same time, the dragon was summoned within his gut. He should be dead. So I suppose we can go ahead and wrap this review up of Dragon Ball and the Curse of the Blood Rubies, and we'll wrap it up by saying that I have high hopes that the next 2 movies in the Dragon Ball franchise will actually be leagues better than this one. Okay, so I just got done with the second movie of the franchise, which is titled Dragon Ball Sleeping Beauty in Devil's Castle. And while, yeah, it is technically better than the first in my opinion, I do think that there are some running similarities between that movie and this movie. Those similarities, of course, being that we have essentially some retold story aspects from the manga and anime that are retold in this movie. And that would mostly be the reintroduction in a new fashion with the new characters such as Launch and Krillin. However, this retelling of introductions is accompanied by a new cast of villains. So to sum up the plot of this new movie, it essentially has to do with the retelling of Krillin's introduction and Master Roshi's agreement to train Goku and Krillin. Except this time, the task at hand required for them to get Master Roshi's approval has to do with them retrieving a beautiful woman, or a beautiful princess according to Roshi, from a castle which is by the Devil's Hand. And they both agree with hopes of being trained by Master Roshi, and they set off on their journey with the typical antics of young Krillin trying to outsmart Goku. And as they're on their journey, the rest of the characters are all shoehorned into the plot by being on summer vacation and wishing to visit Goku. Naturally, Master Roshi explains to them that Goku and his new friend Krillin have both ventured off toward the west to go retrieve Sleeping Beauty. Now, since I've already given a spoiler warning, I'll go ahead and mention that Sleeping Beauty is not a woman nor a princess, it's actually a diamond. And the main villain of this story, whose name is Count Lucifer, is actually using that diamond in a ritual required to destroy the sun. And naturally, his reasoning for this is that he's more or less a demonic vampire type character, who also happens to be in charge of some demonic ogre type characters. So now there are three parties approaching this castle, those being Goku and Krillin, the Bulma's party, which includes Yamcha, Puar, Oolong, and also Launch, who is a party of our own. All of which arrive at roughly around the same time. Goku and Krillin engage the army of ogres in a pretty entertaining fight. Yamcha, Bulma, Puar, and Oolong all have their ship downed and are subsequently escorted to the castle, while Launch arrives with the intention on stealing the stone, as she apparently knows it's not a woman or a princess. Bulma naturally gets captured alone and is more or less serenaded by this Count Lucifer, who has every intent on draining her of blood so he can drink her blood as a form of celebration when they destroy the sun. And in order to do this, they need a machine and the Sleeping Beauty crystal to be present in front of a full moon. Naturally, all three of the invading parties are captured and imprisoned in a kind of crystalline wall of sorts. They are basically forced to spectate the whole event, and when the full moon comes into view, naturally Goku transforms into his Great Ape mode, which conveniently frees all of the heroes of this story before the final conflict can take place. So Goku and the others are all regrouped, and Bulma, who is still captured, conveniently gets a plot exposition by the villain. And when the heroes arrive, she explains to Goku what they're trying to do and asks Goku to destroy the machine. He hits it with a Kamehameha, which conveniently points the machine towards Count Lucifer and destroys him. So after the quick and convenient end of the villain, in a similar vein to the first movie, we go back to Roshi's island, where Launch is introduced to Roshi. He tries to do some pervy things, we have some laughs, and that's the end of the movie. And as I predicted, this movie actually is a bit better than the first one, but there are some striking similarities of how the story is operated. For one, it also serves as a reintroduction of certain characters or a retelling of events that already occurred within the manga and the anime. And the ending of this story feels a bit rushed, although not as bad as the first movie. I will say though that the plot of the first movie actually does a little bit better in terms of its international relatability, as the Industrial Revolution did have an overlying effect on just about every nation in existence. This story, however, was a bit more fantastical, as it borrows aspects of Bram Stoker's Dracula and also uses a few aspects of the Bible. So with those allegorical aspects set aside, I will say that the execution of this movie does feel a bit more impressive, because there are more funny moments, mainly to do with Krillin and Goku's relationship. But at the same time, the villains of this story have a little more time and a little more personality fleshed out of them. And another thing that sets this movie above the previous one is that we spend less time recapping on things that the manga and anime already touched on. That element is still there, but most of this movie felt like new material for the most part. So that is going to do it for my review on Dragon Ball, Sleeping Beauty, and Devil's Castle. So now I'm off to watch the third Dragon Ball movie, and it's safe to say that this one is probably at least going to take the number 2 spot. Alright, so now on to the third Dragon Ball movie, which is actually titled Mystical Adventure. Okay, so now that I've seen these 3 Dragon Ball movies, I can kind of understand the whole purpose for the first, second, and third movies to kind of rehash upon material that we've already seen in the manga and the anime. However, more on that later. For now, I'm just going to recap and review Dragon Ball Mystical Adventure. So this movie kind of begins where the last one left off, with Goku and Krillin training under Master Roshi. And Roshi informs them about a world martial arts tournament in the land of Mifan. And the intro to this story wastes no time before we get to visit this land of Mifan, which is actually the land of Emperor Chaozu. Now, at this point, we get our first movie introduction to the Pilaf crew, and they have apparently been hard at work creating a dragon radar and searching down Dragon Balls for the crane hermit Shin and his brother Tao Pai Pai. Their disciple Tien is also there, and it appears that the crane crew is more or less trying to use Chaozu's resources and kingdom as a method of gaining the Dragon Balls. And we actually get this kind of hinted at and flat out stated. First hinted by the Emperor Pilaf crew, and then flat out stated by the character who was supposed to be General Blue from the Red Ribbon Army. Both of which are quickly dispatched before we go to the location of the final Dragon Ball, where we get to see Appa and Bora. Now, if you don't remember them, they are the characters that Goku deals with in between his fights with Tao Pai Pai. And when they locate the final Dragon Ball, they rationalize that they can just take it to the land of Mifan and negotiate to get their land and resources freed up. Now, if you also mix in the fact that Yamcha, Bulma, Puar, and Oolong are also looking for the Dragon Balls, this actually gives us our reasoning to have the entirety of the Dragon Ball cast and crew in this one event. So Roshi, Goku, Krillin, Bora, and Appa come up with the idea that if any one of the three main fighters from their group wins, that they'll use it for the exact same wish. Now the tournament begins with Yamcha pretty much going up against some fodder. At the same time, Launch and Bulma are actually sneaking off to acquire the 6 Dragon Balls that the Crane crew has already acquired. So after Yamcha is distracted and defeated by Bora, Tao Pai Pai enters the tournament, kills Bora, and sets off the main conflict of the story. Goku actually ends up getting wrecked by Tao and sent flying all the way up to Korin's tower. Conveniently, Korin gives him a Senzu Bean, a small amount of mental training, and then sends him down for the rematch in Penguin Village. Tao ends up being defeated by Goku and Rayleigh. Chaozu is spared by Tien, who actually attacks his master Shin to save Chaozu. And Bulma and Launch are successful in stealing the Dragon Balls, however they manage to get them stuck in the bottom of a sea. So Goku returns from his fight with Pao and conveniently throws the last ball into the sea with the rest of them, summoning Shenron and reviving Bora to end the movie. Alright, so now all 3 movies have been broken down in terms of their conflicts and plots, and I also have to mention, as I said before, that I kind of do understand the whole reasoning behind the script related choices for these movies. Ultimately, the 3 movies combined, if watched back to back to back, have a kind of cohesive, tied-in storyline to paint an overall adventure for Goku and his friends. Also, if you're a casual moviegoer in the mid-80s of Japan and are somewhat casually involved in manga and anime, watching these 3 movies could serve as a perfect venue for you to explore the world of Dragon Ball. Now, a lot of these characters that we see throughout these movies are tied in from different arcs and different moments, but I noticed that some of the characters that are canon who are involved with these storylines are some of the more dramatic, hilarious and even intimidating characters that we've seen. So admittedly, at first, I was a bit kind of turned off with the idea of rewatching or rehashing things that I've already known or already seen, but now I kind of understand where the writers and where Akira Toriyama were coming from in terms of releasing these movies year to year, back to back, and with the time frames and storylines that they chose. So now, without any further ado, we can go ahead and get into my rankings for these 3 movies. These won't reflect in their overall rankings for the entirety of the Dragon Ball movie roster, but for at least the pre-Z era, these are going to be my rankings. So my least favorite, or the lowest ranked movies of these 3, is going to be number 2, Dragon Ball, Sleeping Beauty, and the Devil Castle. And I know I said that this one probably would make it as number 2, but as I finished the 3rd movie, I kind of realized the narrative overarching story between the 3 movies, and this one falls in dead last because it is the least relevant to the main Dragon Ball storyline. So the one plus that this movie has over the number 2 ranked for these 3 movies is that the villains are a little more fleshed out and they don't feel as rushed in terms of their conflict. However, that being said, we can go ahead and get right into my number 2 pick for these 3 movies, and that's going to be the first Dragon Ball movie ever, Dragon Ball Curse of the Blood Rubies. Overall, as I said, the narrative pacing for this movie is just flabbergastingly bad for me, but at the same time, this was the very first Dragon Ball movie, and I would imagine that anime movies in general were still kind of a fresh concept even for Japan. And while I don't think the villain or the central conflict of the plot was well thought out, I do, however, enjoy the concept of industrialization and its effects on a kingdom should their leaders be greedy. And that is ultimately why I'm ranking this as number 2 within these 3 Dragon Ball movies, and it's mainly because with all of the Dragon Ball movies as a whole, even into Z and further, we don't typically get any kind of real deep storylines or parallels like this within the Dragon Ball universe. So for a guy like me who has never seen any of these 3 Dragon Ball movies prior to a couple days ago, I'm gonna go ahead and say that the whole conflict behind the blood rubies and, industrialization, it's a fresh spin on usually what is just action-packed movies. So if you haven't figured it out already, by process of elimination, my favorite movie is going to be Dragon Ball movie number 3, which is titled The Mystical Adventure. While it also had a bit of a rush feel to it like the prior 2, this one, however, had a good deal more action, a good deal more comedy, and even managed to introduce some pretty out there concepts and out there characters to better expand upon the Dragon Ball universe. Now, obviously, as I mentioned earlier in the video, I was not alive for the release of any of these movies, but if I was a moviegoer in Japan with a casual anime liking, this movie would have been good enough to make me want to invest my time and energy into the manga or the anime. It was just a great cast of characters who were involved in this story, even though it jumps around from multiple arcs. It really manages to pull in some of the more dynamic characters that we got to see pre-Z. And we get a good amount of chuckles and laughs. We also get a little bit of backstory with Chaozu and Tien, and we get to see a little bit of a reference to Dr. Slump. And it is for that reason that this movie is going to get my number 1 vote. So that is going to do it for my review and my rankings on the first 3 Dragon Ball movies. So if you enjoyed this video, let me know your thoughts on the movies down below, and then stay tuned for part 2, which is going to cover the first 4 or 5 movies of the Dragon Ball Z era. Thank you very much if you made it this far into the video. Also, forgive me if I sound a bit nasally or congested throughout the video. I've been sick for these past few days, so I've tried to take my sweet old time recording. However, I will be back with part 2 very shortly. So if you guys enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. Also, I'm here in the comment section if you guys want to discuss anything Dragon Ball related. My name's John, I'm with AF Anime, and I'll see you guys in the next video.